Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Trans Joycast, where we talk about community, life, and joy. I am Andrew, he, him pronouns.
And I'm Adam, he, him pronouns.
Adam, welcome to the year 2025. We have made it. I don't know about you. I feel like I've slid into it on my backside, just doing my best to get upright again.
Yep, we all made it.
Boy. Yeah. So one of the fun things that Adam and I and the board have been doing is taking a retrospective look at all the things that we got up to last year, which has been a lot of fun and great to see some of the accomplishments that we've had. We're also looking forward to the things that it is that we want to try to accomplish in this coming year. We're really excited to be prepping for that. So stay tuned at this space and you can keep up with all the fun stuff that we're going to be up to this coming year. However, we do have one very exciting thing that we have just been jumping out of our skin to share with you. And I'm going to let Adam tell us all about it.
Yeah, we've been kind of sitting on it just to make sure that all the disbursements went out and received correctly. But every one of our Beacon grants has been paid out for 2024.
Heck yes. And so
Right?
for folks that haven't maybe been with us since the very, very beginning, Adam and I had been talking for some time about how we can have a positive impact on our communities, since we're in a lot of ways some of the older folks in the community.
I'm not sure how that feels, but you're right.
Yeah, we're group elders. In a lot of ways, we are some of the older folks that we know in the trans community. So in any case, in November of 2023, Adam really kicked us both in the pants and said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start here and then we're going to see what happens.
I mean, we've been tossing around this idea of being able to create a business around, or some sort of self-sustaining nonprofit around helping the trans community. And we didn't know how to do that. In a lot of ways, we still don't know how to do that, but we're learning as we go.
Adam, don't tell them. It's a secret.
No, I'm proud of us. We're learning but we're learning quickly.
Yeah,
with a lot of help. But yeah, back in 2023, we just said, you know what? I don't know how to do this, but I know how to start a GoFundMe, and I know that our trans non-binary siblings shouldn't be the ones having to go fund themselves. So let's see what happens. And we just started asking for money. And then we asked the trans community what it is that they needed. We didn't say this money is for X, Y, or Z. We said, tell us what you need. And we had 4 people respond, and we have helped those 4 people with the things that they needed, which I am really proud of.
Yeah, that's 4 people that are going to be able to move through life just a little bit easier. I mean, not to say that life is easy for anybody. This is one less burden, one less hurdle that they have to surmount on their own. And I'm really excited and proud of the idea that, those are folks that in their own ways, in their own time, are going to be able to do good in their own spaces.
For sure.
Within their capacity. And so and bring their gifts to those spaces without these bills hanging over their heads. Really so Adam, you're reminding me, one particular conversation we were having with some friends of ours was a good chunk of what kind of kicked off the idea that we could go raise money for folks. We were talking about how each of us had funded our own medical costs, and we were talking about the impact of what it meant to have support or not have support in that, to have insurance coverage, to not have insurance coverage, because neither one of us had insurance coverage for that at that time because it wasn't available. And what the conversation really ended up revolving around ultimately was just how dehumanizing, and where you're having to put yourself out there and share all of these private things about yourself that, in other communities wouldn't be necessary.
It wouldn't be broadcast the same way.
Right. And so you're asking people for help, and in doing so, feeling like you have to share private things about yourself that,
You're being put on display. You're being put on display in a way that is not necessarily helpful or healing at a time when you're not ready for it, which was kind of the juxt of what we wanted to get across, right? Like, we are at a position where we can stand up and ask those things.
That's right.
And, you know, we can employ your glitter bomb for good and MC whatever we need to try and raise money. And we have, and will continue to do so.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because nobody should have to put themselves in such a vulnerable Nobody should have to put themselves in such a vulnerable position in order to get the basic care and support that they need.
Yes.
And that was really what inspired
all of this.
Right. The fundraising, which then led to
Yeah.
saying, shoot, you know, what else can we do?
Right. And continuing to listen to the community, right? Like, when we have events and we talk to people, and finding the little space in our community that we can be the most helpful in, and letting that grow naturally.
Right. Right. I think the other thing that I'm really proud of us for is we have just tried things, and some of the stuff we wouldn't do again. Some of it we are going to figure out how to make even bigger and better.
Yeah.
Everything that we've done to this point has been a first for us, and everything that we've done, we've taken lessons from in order to figure out how to move forward. And so one of the things that is part of upcoming conversations for us is, how do we want to navigate the grant offerings moving forward? How do we want to work to make that, well, we need to make that more sustainable. So how do we go about doing that? And that includes things like applying for grants for nonprofits. You know, we've had such generous community members donating to our Beacon Fund, which is incredible, and we still need and are so grateful for it. Shameless plug, you can set up a recurring donation if you think $5 a month, $10 a month.
We've had a couple of people do that, and those are the kind of things that help us keep because we need insurance, and we need supplies, and we need, like, just basic things that we have to keep us going.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, Adam. So much of what we've been doing has come out of pocket. Very, very, very fortunately, every bit of the grants that we set up, we were able to raise money for. So that's really exciting. Now we're in a position of, okay, well, we have a business that we need to sustain, and especially knowing what the current climate is looking like and evolving into as we move into this next administration, our existence, I really think, is more important than ever. And as Adam said, we have costs that include insurance, so that if some grumpy Gus comes and decides that they don't like what we're doing, they can't sue the pants off of Adam or me or any of our board members, and so our own living situation isn't compromised there. And that's not cheap. That's money. And then in order for us to continue doing this type of work and getting the word out there and just trying to spread joy, we've got application costs and that sort of thing. So we're doing everything we can to keep the costs as low as we possibly can. And it costs money to make money, unfortunately.
If we have learned one thing, I think that, as with everything that we've just tried and allowed the community to kind of lead us through, I think these grants are exactly the same way, where we've been in-house calling them trans care grants, and we'll figure out what that means this year. And that might change from year to year, but yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah. I also wanted to kind of touch back on what you were saying earlier about us reaching out and asking, what does the community need? Adam, can you talk a little bit about the types of things we were able to support folks in this round?
Sure. So all of our recipients are in the Southeast. It's just mostly from proximity to us. We start where home is, and that's home for us. So they're all in the Southeast. Everything from housing assistance to some of those medical bills. Insurance might cover bits and pieces, and they surprise you with an extra $800 here, $1,000 there, because the anesthesiologist did X, and all of a sudden you're underwater. One of them was one of those kind of surprise bills that they were fighting with insurance just to get off their back. But like you had said, most of it was medical. But that's wealth creating for an entire generation. If we can get people the things that they need when they need it, rather than having somebody not only have to put themselves out into the ether of social media on display to ask for money, but even if you you had to wait and save and scrimp, and you shouldn't have to wait that long to be yourself, right? Or at least I don't believe so.
I totally agree with that. The other thing, and we did touch on this a little bit, is that so many folks end up having, I mean, I'm an example of that. I was very, very fortunate in that I was able to raise the money for my surgery. Insurance was not covering, no, that's not true. Insurance was covering surgeries, but most folks didn't take it. And at the time, the folks that did take insurance many of them didn't have a lot of experience doing that kind of medical work. So, I was really reticent to go to somebody with less experience. And I was very, very fortunate in being able to raise the money to be able to go to somebody outside of what insurance even would have covered. So, that has, very fortunately, that situation has evolved for a lot of folks. There are a lot more experienced surgeons that are offering care under insurance, but for me, that wasn't the case. So in any case, I had to really put myself out there in ways that did not feel great. I felt like in order to raise this money, I had to share the story of myself and trust that what I shared into the public eye was going to be treated with care. And even outside of that, you're talking about, at least the way that I went about it, I was talking about the specifics of what the money had to go to and how the budget broke down and like physically the things that would be involved in order for me to feel good about asking folks for their help, which to begin with doesn't feel great.
No.
To ask for the help in and of itself didn't feel spectacular, which, truth be told, might have more to do with my own.
I mean, it starts that cycle of shame right from the start, that language is powerful. And if we allow ourselves to be put in that position of begging, if you will.
That's exactly right.
It becomes, there's a shame cloud around that.
Yeah, that's really well said. Yeah, so all to say, to be able to take that from other folks so they don't have to experience it, to be able to help create wealth in a space that does not have it, to keep people out of debt if we possibly can, or at least out of significant debt, that feels incredibly important.
I'd kind of like to mention too, for allies or maybe people that are new to the trans community, oftentimes at the beginning of our transitions, we're underemployed, if employed at all. And we're a very in need, small group of people. And to be able to help someone through that, it's almost less about the money as it is being able for us and the interactions and the relationships that we're able to build with these people as we try and help them and figure out what they need, and just so that they know that their community loves them, the community is there to support them. And I think that feels amazing.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So, speaking of language mattering, as Adam and I have said in previous podcast episodes, one of the things that we're committed to is talking about things going on in the real world.
Even though the world has some negative spins on how they're viewing and treating the trans community, that doesn't mean that we as a trans community need to buy into that for ourselves.
So we wanted to bring up something that has come up in the news in the last day or so around Meta, the owner of Facebook, Instagram. There's another app that's escaping me at the moment. In any case, they have changed their policies around how folks are allowed to engage with each other on the platform. And I would argue not for the better. No. Laughs in pain. So I came across an article from the New York Times that talked about how Zuckerberg and Meta have decided to change their policies around the way that folks engage with each other. In addition to that, they also made some changes to their fact-checking policies, which means that they're no longer fact checking, essentially. So, several years ago, during and around the first Trump election, Meta had created a policy around fact checking that if there was enough reports of something that people thought wasn't accurate, they would send the claim out to a third party fact checker, and the fact checker would come back, and then you would get some sort of you being the participant on Facebook seeing a comment would get some sort of alert that says, hey, this is not verified or what have you. That has gone away. They've taken that away and they've replaced it with what sounds like kind of a community policing popularity voting contest. And I don't have to go too far down the hole in terms of what my assumptions are going to be, or what my assumptions are around how that's going to be leveraged by conspiracy theorists and the like, and just misinformation campaigns. So yeah, they've really loosened the reins on the sharing of misinformation. In addition to that, they have created a new policy around the ability to use inflammatory language when it comes to topics such as immigration or LGBT rights. And very specifically, they called out gender identity.
And they also it specifically called out that they were making it okay to make comments about someone's mental capacity based on their gender and identity. I think that it's really interesting that when you go through the policy, or at least the articles that I read about it, it not only allows for inflammatory language to be used against the trans community and other unfavorable minorities, but it also protects the people making those unfavorable remarks. Because one of the things was that cisgendered would be considered a slur. So, and that just like the logic circles just don't even touch, right? That if language is that important that you are feeling threatened by someone calling your gender cis versus trans, I don't even know. I can't.
No.
I can't. There's no logic that allows for it except for groupthink, and that's scary.
Yeah, my take on it has been that Facebook had been very much in the crosshairs of Trump and his contingent because they didn't like the way that they were managing content on their platform. And since Trump's election, I can't remember if it was Meta or if it was specifically Zuckerberg donated like $1 million to their inauguration fund, and this is there's a pretty strong connection between this move and Zuckerberg's desire not to be in trouble.
Yeah, of course there is.
With this new administration. We have to remember prior to Trump's election, he was threatening to use presidential power to incarcerate a lot of folks. Zuckerberg was on that list of folks who Trump had threatened to incarcerate simply because of the way that he manages the business.
Yeah, I think it's really important to mention those kinds of things because that's unfortunately part of the conversation now. That power dynamic, that power struggle, the capitalism of it. Yeah. It's a business. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So Joe Kaplan, Meta's chief global affairs officer, defended the changes, writing, quote, "We're getting rid of a number of restrictions on topics like immigration, gender identity, and gender that are the subject of frequent political discourse and debate. It's not right that things can be said on TV or the floor of Congress, but not on our platforms." Meta now claims its policies are, quote, "designed to allow room for these types of speech." Literally, that's what they're saying. They're saying, yes, we're allowing for this type of speech.
Yeah.
Despite the potential harm such rhetoric poses to vulnerable communities. So I'd shared that article, the New York Times article, with a group text of friends of mine. And I had said, I'm going to be writing a letter. I'm going to send it on to all of the executives in that space. And I'll use LinkedIn to do that. And I'll find their emails and I'll do it that way. And one of my friends responded, that's really admirable. I'd be unbelievably surprised if they were to change their policy. And I took a second to think about my response, because me being one single voice that's going to reach out to different people, no, I don't expect that one single voice is the voice that's going to change an entire business plan. I would say to anybody that feels that way, the way that my friend feels, that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point for me is, well, there are several points, but one of those at the top of the list for me is that I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror every night and say that I did what I could during the day to make my little spaces a better place. And for me, that doesn't necessarily mean that I believe that I'm going to move an entire shareholder-owned company into a different policy at all. I've had plenty of experience to prove that is not going to be the case. However, it does matter to my friends that I do that. It does matter to folks that don't know me but don't feel like they have allies in places that are speaking up. It does matter when I think of social movements as being a big wave. My letters aren't the giant wave. That's not what that is, but it is part of it. It's some of the water droplets that helps gain momentum. The letters that I'll write to Meta and its executives are not the war. They are the battle. They are a battle. And I can be present for that battle, because the other thing that I'm going to do with that is I will publish publicly what it is that I'm writing, and folks can, use that to help them reach out to somebody if they want to. But at the end of the day, it's about planting seeds.
Yeah.
And we don't go quietly when these things happen. We can't. Because if we do, what they're asking for us to do is become complacent, is to get exhausted, is to see that there's so many things going on in so many different places that we feel like we don't have any agency. And none of that is true. We have agency, and we get the opportunity every day to decide how we're going to use it. Some days I've got the energy to write a letter. Some days I just don't. Some days I need a nap, and that is okay too. We all have the opportunity to have an influence, big and small. And most often, they're going to be small influences. The big movements don't happen without those small things happening underneath them and behind them to create the foundations for things to really get moving. If we don't resist these types of changes now, then we're going to be starting from the beginning the next time it happens. And we don't need to start from the beginning. There have been plenty of folks that have done great work before us, and more to follow.
This community has never started back from the beginning, right? Like we have been fighting for generations, and the difference now is that we're being seen in a different way. We're being noticed in a different way, but this community doesn't turn around. We're going forward.
Yeah.
I think in some ways the way like these regulations around language, they don't have laws obviously, but allowing this kind of hateful speech, the root of it really is that it just makes me cringe that if it's allowed on TV and the floor of Congress like that, that's the problem. That's the problem when our Congress is talking about these kinds of issues in this derogatory language. That's a problem.
The bar is just so low.
So low.
It's just so low. I'd heard, I think it was on NPR, about a study that had been done by somebody at Harvard. They were trying to figure out how many kids there are that identify as trans. And that's a really difficult thing to actually measure. But one way that they have gone about it is they've looked at insurance data, and they say, okay, so how many kids have been, quote, diagnosed, and I hate that word, but that's the language that's used, are diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And then they looked at, within that, how many kids were receiving medical intervention for it of any sort? And I say any sort, but generally that tends to be hormone blockers. The number that they had come up with the millions of people that are insured in the United States, 18,000 children. That is it. That even have the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And then significantly smaller number than that, just a fraction of that, are receiving hormone blockers essentially. And as a little asterisk here for folks that might not be particularly familiar with what hormone blockers do, they stop the progression of puberty. They don't stop it forever. Like, it only holds off puberty for as long as you're on the hormone blockers. And as soon as you come off of them, puberty progresses as expected. So 18,000 kids, and even less who are on, on a record somewhere as being trans, out of the millions and millions and millions of people here in this country. And that's where we're going to put our energy.
Yeah. Well, and that's where we're fighting with our language. And that's part of the main problem, is that there's no humanity to us as trans people for the greater population. You can start throwing around these kinds of words. You're not just putting them out into the ether. You're saying this about someone's child, someone's friend, someone's spouse, someone's person. Real people. A very, very small number of real people who are in some sort of struggle that we can help with.
Right.
We're depriving them of help.
Yeah. So, going back to that meta decision, it's a real concern, because it is an indication culturally of, it's a little bit of chicken or egg. Does social media influence culture? Does culture influence social media? And I think it's both. As you said, Adam, policy really helps shape the community spaces. And the Facebook space is a community space. Instagram is a community space. And there are kids on there, there's adults on there that already were getting, we've seen some of the stuff that comes through on the Trans Joy account. I've had horrendous things said to me if I've been a part of any conversation, even just using my individual account. And as we've said before, people on there using their real names, and their accounts show that where they work and how many kids they have. And it's wild to me what folks think is okay to say. And Meta is deciding to take that bar that they had set, lowering it to meet some of the lower standards of the country, because they're, as far as I can see, because they're afraid of the consequences of not doing that with this upcoming administration. And that acquiescence is disconcerting. It's part of the reason that I think it's important that we don't go quietly into the night on these types of things. I've already got friends who've removed their accounts, even just in that date. I know really and truly the reason I even still have an account there is because I manage Trans Joy on the account side there. And
the space needs to have continual Trans Joy in it if it's going to allow for all the hate.
Exactly where I was going. Yep, 100%. Yeah. It's very similar to, we've had conversations around, hey, what happens if laws change here in Georgia? And shoot, Georgia's not the easiest place for folks to live as a trans person. It's not the hardest, but it is frequently right behind the Floridas of the country in terms of legislation and that sort of thing. Georgia's leadership is often trying to push us in that direction. So, it's not an easy place to be, but it is important that we are here. It is important that we are here, and more to the point, important that those of us that can be visible are. And that's why Adam and I do try to be visible all the time.
I think it's really interesting to think about why. We've talked about why we think they're doing this, right? There's part of it that is just protection, money, capitalism, politics, all that kind of stuff. But I think there's another little piece of it too that's just language in general, because we as a queer community, our younger communities, our younger generations, we've taken over that gender conversation. We've redefined, and we're using words in ways that we have never done before, and it's scaring people. And I think that's some power there. They're fighting against us normalized. Like, enough people know the term cisgender that they want it to be a slur.
That's such a good point.
I can take that, because y'all didn't even know what that was.
Yo, that's such a good point.
Yeah. We got to give ourselves a little credit for the fight that we've already made. I think that's kind of what I was trying to say about like the generations of trans people. We don't turn back. We're still moving forward, and they're fighting. And I'd like to say that it's just society dragging their heels of change. And it's going to be rough. It's going to be a hard drag. But how'd you say that you were skidding into 2025 on your ass? We're going to be dragging through. But we're not going backwards. And we're not going to stop using this language. We're not going to stop allowing for space for those 7 genders that we've talked about as our baseline.
Right. That's so true. If you look at any social movement, that kind of counterculture really starts increasing in volume in terms of the types of things that they're willing to do to try to prevent change. And we've seen it. I mean, shoot, you go back as recently as gay marriage as a battleground. The more accepted gay people and their identities became, and the more momentum that community gathered to gain equal rights, the louder the folks that were going to oppose it became. And it's all because they didn't have to be loud before. And now, we're in a society, to your point, Adam, where we're forcing folks to show their hand. And I mean, I say that I don't need anybody to show their hand other than us saying, yeah, we're human beings. I just need to be on insurance, and I need to fit into society so that I can be a productive member of it, just like everybody else wants to be.
And to your point about when you were talking about paying for surgery and all that kind of stuff, like, I had to search out doctors just to beg somebody to do some of these things, because there just wasn't anybody. So to me, the conversation that we're having, I know that some of those young people are getting the help that they need. There are those parents that took all those kids to DC to protest in front of the Supreme Court. They're supporting their kids and getting them the help that they need, and that we know that those things exist now. And I have to hang my hat on those victories a little bit.
Heck yeah. So as always, Adam and I are asking our allies to help us stand up. One of the things that we've talked about quite a bit off of the show is that we know that it's a really hard thing for anybody to associate themselves in any capacity with the word trans. And by that, I mean, I don't mean it's hard for, our friends to have trans friends or anything like that.
No. Yeah.
But we also recognize, I mean, it's hard for Adam and I to wear the word trans in some spaces. It's hard, it is work. It is labor for us to be seen and be comfortable with being seen. It is in some ways an extra step for folks who are cis, not trans identified, to display that word for any number of reasons. One, there are plenty of folks that are concerned about taking up space that isn't theirs. But two, and maybe more importantly, it can be a scary thing to do, because as soon as you are assumed trans, you have given away a lot of privilege and in some cases a lot of safety. Yeah. So, we recognize the bravery that it takes to stand with such a disfavored minority. And every day we will thank you and share our appreciation and better believe that we believe that if we can make this little space better, it makes a better world. It isn't just trans people that benefit. It is the broader LGBTQIA plus community. It is people of color. It is immigrants. It is, a rising tide raises all boats, and we're trying to do our part as best we can to do that. And for all of you that are stepping up to do the same, it matters. It doesn't matter that you are just a singular voice pushing to ask Meta to change its policies back. You're not just a singular voice writing and calling your representatives. You're not just a single voice carrying a banner that says, I support my trans kid or my trans friends. You're not just a singular voice. There are a lot of us, but we need a heck of a lot more. So we appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely appreciate it. And I think that it's worth noting that to all of our trans non-binary siblings, that if you can't, that's okay. 'Cause it's hard, and oftentimes we can't either. And I say that to my siblings, I say that to our allies. Just pause and think about how much effort it is for you to consider to support something that says trans. What if you were trans? That's a lot. It can be a lot of mental work, and it's okay to take a break.
I love that you said that. That's so true. And then to add to that, Adam, a final shout out to those folks who just can't be out yet. You might be listening to this podcast and haven't been able to share your truth with anybody or very few people yet. And that is also okay. There's a space for you. We see you. We love you. We're here for you. We are able to do the work that we do because when we were in your position, other folks were doing it. Mm-hmm. So, you just keep doing that work that you're doing. You keep working to make sure that you are safe and in a place where you are able to be your best self, and we'll be here for you as soon as you're ready. We'll have the party ready.
Right.
Yeah. All to say, there is so much, to your point, Adam, there's so much good that is really reflected in the garbage that's going on, because it's a symbol of the fact that progress is being made.
Yeah. And it highlights the beauty of our community in our response, in our fight, in the way that we're rallying. And it highlights what did I say at the beginning? Those logic circles that are way, like, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And it highlights the hate in a really obvious way.
And how can you hate people that are just so damn cute?
Right.
Hair toss. So, first joy of the year, Adam. Every podcast episode, we talk about what our joy has been and share it with you all in the hopes that you think about what your joys have been. So, Adam, kick us into 2025 with your first podcast joy.
My first podcast joy is that I have a new furnace.
Oh, do tell.
Yeah. So for my friends or anybody that knows me and has been listening for a really long time, I've been struggling and going to the doctor a lot. I've been nauseous. I've been sleeping very well. And turns out my furnace was leaking carbon monoxide at a very, very low rate. And I have been slowly poisoning myself. But now that I have a new furnace, I slept for the first time. So 2025 is already off to a banger.
We're about to find out just how much smarter than I am Adam is now that his brain cells are working.
Now that I've slept? Hold on.
Now that he's got oxygen.
Yeah, so that was
my days on top are over.
That was not a fun expense. As my dad said, I should just go up in the crawl space or the attic little space and have my coffee in the morning and stare at it. It's just, isn't that how house stuff feels sometimes? It's like, God damn, I sent all that money and you can't even see it.
Right? You should hang a nice piece of art on it. So there's like a good reason for it to be there other than your health and well-being.
Yeah, so that's my joy. That's my joy. Yeah.
So do you still have that hole in your living room ceiling?
I do still have my hole in the living room ceiling too. From the hurricane, mind you, if you've been paying attention.
Right, yeah. So Adam's been living a little rough.
It sounds like our house is falling apart, and it really isn't. But
it's not.
No,
mostly.
we've just been fighting with insurance, and you don't mess with my wife. She's gonna keep fighting with you.
Yeah. I always want her on my team.
Yeah.
There's no question
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
That's so funny. You know, I will say you are much more chipper than you have been maybe in the last year. So it is a question as to how long that leak had been there.
Whew. Yeah, kind of crazy. Yeah. But what's your joy? It's hard to beat carbon monoxide poisoning.
I know. What is my joy? I've got a couple. I feel like one of them is I just, in the last part of the year, my body was like, nah, we're done. And I have just picked up every bug that is probably known to man.
Well, you spent a lot of time with your nieces and nephews, so that's part of the problem, I think.
Yeah, I think that was...
They are usually the vector.
Yeah, that was my origin story, was hanging out with the kids. And, you know, I love it. I love roughhousing with them. And then, of course, they're super, you know, when they see you, they just climb all over you. And anyway, so I ended up with something after Thanksgiving, and then was okay. And then I ended up with something after Christmas. And now I am, I think, finally just starting to recover from it. Hopefully I've not been too sniffly on this podcast. So that's one joy. I'm starting to feel a lot better. And then two, I have been working to get this podcast area set up for me. And if you're listening, you're not able to see, but I've put all sorts of posters and got some lights that I actually bought in 2020 for a parade that we were doing and never ended up getting to use them because that parade got canceled. So I've got those sitting behind me, and one of them says "Let's party" and the other says "Good vibes only." Yeah, so I've got like a cozy spot that is dedicated to working on trans joy stuff, and in particular doing the podcast. So that's
feels good.
Yeah,
you feel settled.
Yeah, it feels really homey.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't show you the desk next to me that I still need to work on because it's a disaster. But I love having a space here. I got to figure out, I will say I do have a cat box right next to me. Not, it needs to be plugged in because anyway, we're going to have to do something about that. You know, peaks and troughs.
What was Willy Wonka and the smell-o-vision or something? Right. As long as it's not that, nobody else has to worry about it. So
yeah. Oh my gosh. My
your
dog.
Own battle.
So I came out. That reminds me, my dog. I came out of the shower, had dried off, got dressed, walked out, and Yosemite. She's white and curly, and they both need haircuts, but it's been too cold outside for me to give them their haircuts because today it's like 36 degrees or something. So anyway, Yosemite had gone to the bathroom and got poop stuck all in her butt. And so I spent a good chunk of my morning chasing her around the house with a paper towel. And
sounds lovely.
After I hang up, I'll be doing it again.
Great. You're making me really love that my dogs are short-haired dogs.
Oh my gosh.
I got street dogs. They don't need my help.
It's these dogs are high maintenance, apparently. Their fur is marginally high. Their fur's fine until it's not. Oh boy. So that's my joy will be once my dog is clean and fresh. Oh God.
I think we got some cool events coming up. So stay tuned. Keep an eye on Instagram. Keep an eye on the podcast. I'm working on some things that I think everybody's going to enjoy this spring.
Heck yeah. The other thing that we should mention is we've got a couple of new drops in the Etsy store.
Yes.
For you cold weather fans, and especially for those of you that hate cold weather, we have brand new beanies. They're super cute, and we would love for y'all to check them out. As a side note, the money that we raise in the Etsy shop goes towards helping us support spreading trans joy. So all of that money gets put right back into the business and helps us do the things that we're doing that we were talking about the whole episode.
Yeah.
Today. So check it out at Etsy. The shop is called Trans Joy. There's no space there between trans and joy. All right, so I think that does it for us today. We'll call it a wrap. The best way you can help us spread trans joy through this podcast is to subscribe, like, share, and review. And please comment when you see posts about it, because it grabs attention of the social media algorithm. Remember to follow us at Transjoy USA on Facebook and Instagram. And for merch, as we said, head over to our Etsy shop. Thanks again to everybody who's listening. We love you so much and are wishing you the happiest of New Year's.
Happy New Year. Till next time.